California of the past.
I
I
am
am
California of the past.
I
I am
am
California of the
past.
past.
Hello, my name is Leslie Charles Hedges, and people often ask me, oh, what is an Englishman like you doing in California in a place like this? Well, it's an involved story really, but if you've got a little time, I'll tell you about it. My family and I lived in England in the south, where we were gainfully employed and had a comfortable house in Oxfordshire, near the beautiful college town of Oxford. And my brother decided to leave Canada, where he emigrated some years earlier, and to live in Southern California. And he's a very persuasive gentleman. And we went for various family visits, and we thoroughly enjoyed California. We did all the usual places, Disneyland and SeaWorld and Universal Studios, like the tourists do. We did the tourist bit. But the weather was so gorgeous, and the beaches were beautiful, the seas were blue, and the cars were good, the restaurants were, and supermarkets. We hadn't ever seen supermarkets of that size in our lives. We were used to the village grocery store, which was a little removed from a very large supermarket. So he said to me, would you like to live here? And I thought, well, I've never thought about it. And I said, well, it's a wonderful place. We've thoroughly enjoyed our holidays here. Maybe we could. It's worth thinking about it. So we went home to England, and my two young daughters, well, I say young, they were now nearly in their 20s, said, yes, Dad, let's go. So I said, well, all right, we'll certainly. I said, but I'm not going until I've had another look at California. And they said, what for? I said, well, look, there's a difference here, dear, between tourist California and working California. And I don't want to go over there in my middle age, as it was, and find myself cleaning up in Disneyland or something like that. I want to find gainful employment. I want to make sure I can find it. They said, all right. So we came back for the second time. And I began to look at the labour market, and I made various inquiries, and I found that I would have sufficient qualifications as a sales manager, in which I was in England for most of my life, to come to California. So we decided to apply, and we did so in the middle of 1979. We filled in an enormous application. They wanted to know the details of my grandmother's birth, and she was long dead, but they wanted to know. So we filled in this detailed application. We sent it to the United States Embassy in Grosvenor Square. And we were told that our application would be treated in the date at which it was received, chronological order. Well, that sounded all right. So we waited, and we waited, and we waited. So after about 6 months, I decided to call, and I said, excuse me, could you tell me what is happening to our application? They said, oh, well, you have to do it again. And I said, why? They said, because it could be out of date. Things could have changed. So I said, fine, sent it over, and I filled it out again. And this happened time and time again, and months went by, it became years, and then I called again, and I said, what's happening now? They said, well, there's a moratorium. And I said, what does that mean? They said, well, when the State Department has decided we're not issuing any visas at all to any country in Europe at all. I said, well, that's a bit hard. Well, how long is that going to last? They said, well, about a year. Oh, I said, thanks. So we waited another year. And after a year, I called again and said, is my application now active, and what is the status? They said, well, it's a pity, really, because you should have come for an interview some time ago. Now, an interview is all important. You have to go to the embassy, see the consular official, and if you seem acceptable with a medical report, you could be accepted. But I hadn't received anything about an appointment. So I was furious, absolutely furious. So I drove from where I lived in South Oxfordshire to Grosvenor Square in a matter of half an hour, I think. Should have got a ticket. But anyway, so I got there and rushed into the embassy immigration area and said, "What's going on?" And I watched the young girl at the computer, and her face fell a mile. And she called a consular official over and she said, "What do you think?" And he looked over her shoulder at the screen and said, "Oh dear, obviously they've made an enormous error." I forgot to tell you as well that earlier on our application had been lost. I should have told you that. Somebody bright soul said, "Why don't you put this application in a minute of file?" Which they promptly did and sent it to the Philippine Islands, where it rested for many, many. I don't think we ever got it back. So again, we had to reapply. And I was told by the embassy there was more cables exchanged between America and the Philippines to get my application back than there was during the Second World War. But there you are. So we obviously attended. The consular officer said, "Could you arrive in 7 days and we will issue a visa, all being well?" So the entire family arrived, except one of my daughters had emigrated to Canada. I think she got tired of waiting, so she went to Canada. And so the three of us arrived at Grosvenor Square and met this consular officer, a charming gentleman, charming. And we swore we wouldn't overturn the government of the United States, and we weren't active members of the communist parties, and several other things which we had to forego. And he promptly swore us in, and we were issued with visas in about a week, which we promptly. In addition, we had to have a chest X-ray. Now, in those, I don't know why. I never did find. Possibly, the medical authorities were terrified of importing tuberculosis from other countries in the East somewhere. So all of us had our chest X-rays in large envelopes, and we were told very firmly, "Do not pack these in your luggage. You must have them available at all times, particularly when you arrive at Los Angeles or your port of entry." I can't see how an airport can be a port. I suppose it is really. But anyway, we arrived there, and we arrived at the same time as 3 747s, which is hundreds and hundreds of people. And what we found to our cost is that they deal with immigration last of all. So we waited after a 10-hour journey. We stood in the hall of Los Angeles Airport waiting to talk to the immigration people. And finally we arrived and they took our photographs for our green cards and IDs. And I remember saying to the immigration officer, where would you like us to put these chest X-rays, which we have in our hot little hands? We wouldn't part with them. And he said, "Well, what are they?" And I said, "These are chest X-rays." He said, "I don't want those." I said, "Well, we were told we wouldn't get admission to America without them." I said, "What do you think we should do?" He said, "Well, you could always use them as a dartboard." So after all that, we arrived in California, and we lived with my brother for several months, and then we moved to the fair city of Pomona in 1982, where we still live today. And that's the end of our exciting story of how to get into America. Thank you.